Sound check, test prova. Test prova 1 2 3 4 5. Sound check.
Ses 1 2 ses deneme. Ses 1 2 ses deneme 1 2 3 4 5 ses 1 2. Benim sesim temiz ya bunlar. Ses 1 2 ses deneme 1 2 3 4 5 ses 1 2 3 4 5 6 ses deneme. Ses 1 2 ses 1 2 3 4 5 6 ses deneme 1 2 3 4 5 ses. Ses 1 2 3 4 5 ses 1 2 3 4 5 deneme 1 2 3 4 ses 1 2 3 4 5 6 ses deneme 1 2 3 4 5.
Say sound check test prova 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. Say sound check test prova. Ses 1 2 3 4. Yes.
No audio.
No audio. Şeye ses gelmiyor şu an. Ses prova deneme 1 2 3 4 5. Şimdi düzeldi diyor bak o da internetten. İnternetteki DJ'ni düzelmiş. SEO test prova 1 2 3 4. Dişi mi? Dişiden ceke var abi. SEO say. Ses prova. Şu an tamamdır diyor ha. İyi yani geliyor mu sesim Samet? Samet beni duyabiliyor musun doğru düzgün? Temiz mi? Az önce şimdi bozuldu değil mi? Yeah, we got it. Yeah. Şimdi duyuyor musun? Şimdi nasıl? Şimdi nasıl Samet? Bir mesele et abi. Tamam. Bitti. Tamam.
Abi kolay gelsin.
panelists, and then also by introducing them indicate the order in which they will make their presentations. But at the outset, I want to encourage all of you to participate in the panel. I know that each of the panelists have indicated that they really prefer to have you ask questions and to be a part of the discussion. So we will more or less limit the panelists' first intervention to about 7 to 10 minutes to allow you to come in with your points of view. But the Internet is viewed as a source of employment growth in the ICT sector and in creating new opportunities in the overall economy. However, we have noticed in recent empirical studies that there seems to be a divergence between the net effects of the Internet on jobs and revenue production as opposed to productivity itself. And this divergence is causing some concern, obviously, by our political leaders as well as by those who study this economic impact. But as we are looking at this issue, we wish to kind of consider it from a variety of points of view, since we also know that the IT sector is driving innovation and is in a great extent the employment trend of the future. So with this as a kind of brief introduction to kick off a very complex issue which the panelists will comment upon, let me now introduce this distinguished group of experts. First of all, and going from the right from my right is Lorenzo Pupilio, who is Executive Director in the Public and Regulatory Affairs Unit of Telecom Italia, an affiliated researcher at Columbia Institute for Ellie Noem is Professor of Economics and Finance at the Columbia Business School and Garrett Professor of Public Policy and Business Responsibility. Lilian Nawaga is Policy Officer at the Collaboration on International ICT Policy in East and Southern Africa and is also President of the Internet Society, the Ugandan chapter. And to her right is Minister Diego Molano, who is Minister in the Ministry of ICTs in Colombia. And then Michael Kendi, who is Chief Economist for the Internet Society. In that order of presentation, I would first like to introduce again Lorenzo Pupilio, who will talk about the impact of technological changes on employment and the decoupling of the productivity growth from jobs and income, the core issue of this panel. Mr. Pupilio, please.
Thank you very much. I mean, to be fair, I think when we approach this issue of ICT and jobs, we have to start saying that we are living in a period of economic turbulence. The big picture is not positive as it was 10 years ago, and to some extent we have to take into account that there is a general skepticism that is prevailing. But we have also to be very careful in the analysis that we make. First of all, we have to say that technology innovation, in this case digital technology, historically technology innovation had always disruptive effect on the job market, at least in the early stage of the diffusion. Think about the diffusion of the steam engine, electricity, and so on. But I think that we have to make clear that now, today, this disruption is happening in a different way. It's happening at a faster speed and is happening on a broader scale than in the past. And why is this? Why is it happening this way? I think that this is the byproduct of one basic characteristics of the digital technology. Digital technology seems to be characterized by economy of scale, not only on the supply side, in other words, the idea that you can increase the output, you get cheaper production, but on the demand side. In other words, there is this strong network effect, and everybody won't have the leading product because everybody else has this product. So if you combine this strong economy of scale on the supply side, on the demand side, you get this model of the winner takes all. The company that win gets all the markets, all the revenue, and in this sense there is a big disruption of the competitor. Okay, there are many cases in point. One is this very easily quoted is the one of the digital photography, the case of Kodak versus Instagram. Big company, under 45,000 people. Went bankruptcy, and basically we have a company like Instagram, 15 people, they are billionaire. Okay. Now, what are the consequences of this process? First of all, I would say this what economists call the job market polarization. There is in other words, if you plot the level of skills against the level of jobs, you find that there is a high demand for low and high skilled jobs. In other words, the middle skilled jobs are disappearing. These are two important consequences. From one side, it seems that the middle class overall is losing ground. On the other side, income inequality is growing tremendously. In other words, it seems that digital technology is let the pie, the product growing, but in a very unequal way. Quoting some data from the US, but it's happening the same, unfortunately, in Europe too. For us, it's something new. For the first time before the Great Depression, over half of total income in the US went up to the 10% of America in 2012. The top 1% earned over 22% of income, more than doubling their share since the early 1980s. This, to some extent, is what Eric Wilson and MacArthur called the spread of the digital technology. The second effect is that we are having what can be called the decoupling of productivity growth from income and employment growth. Although this seems to be a controversial phenomenon between the US and Europe and other countries, but what's happening, contrary to the past, in which for other innovation, productivity, income and jobs were going all in the same direction, now seems to be that productivity is growing, but jobs and income are diverging to some extent. Okay, I think it's also fair to look not only at the supply side, but also the demand side. And this is what looks more positively. On the demand side, basically we have an income effect. In other words, ICT is increasing efficiency of production, of the way in which company works and produce their own services. This is reducing prices. So there is an increasing of this an income effect to some extent. At the same time, many new products are created. This is an extremely interesting process because it's characterized by three drivers in the digital technology. The fact that this technology is exponential, characterized by the digital law, the Moore's law, it's all digital, it's combinatorial. The case in point is, think about application. Sometimes we don't realize, but application like the most important application in digital technology are the one that use, they combine already existing technology. Think about weights. No? It's a combination of location sensor, data transmission, GPS system, and social networks. It is extremely important because something we are sometimes oriented in thinking on innovation as producing only new products. Instead, in the digital technology is allowing us to creating new products, but combining the existing product. And the combination can be can grow in an enormous matter. Okay, and the limit is only how this different component can be combined. Now, what are the policy implications that we have to look at? First of all, I think there is a measurement problem when we define productivity. How we capture the bounty of digital economy in the statistics. In other words, in the GDP, we put all these products and services, they have a price. But in digital economy, there are product and price, they have a zero price. Think about Wikipedia, the maximization of consumer surplus. Think about, for instance, for us, WhatsApp, it's a loss of revenue, but for consumer, they get a service for free to some extent. And this is not captured in the GDP measurement. Another very important area is this relations on between ICT and education. In other words, it's true that there is a displacement of jobs, but is this coming from a lower demand for jobs or maybe for a demand of different skill of jobs? And I think that I'm inclined to say that there is a need of different different type of skills, and ICT can play an enormous role in making possible, you know, a large-scale evolution of skill for the population, especially the one that get displaced. For policymakers, another interesting issue I think they should look at carefully is that digital market, because are characterized by this model of the winner takes all, can be characterized by strong monopoly power. In other words, ICT reduce cost, but if the markets are not competitive, there is a creation of extra profit. Where does this extra profit go? I think that there is a need for some type of regulatory. Related to that is the issue of tax. Need for people to be retrained require definitely new source of resources, you know, for the government to do that. And I think that it's important to start to think about some type of negative income tax. In other words, guarantee to everybody some type of minimum income. On this matter, I think it's extremely important as for us as telecom operator, we raise this issue of a level playing field in the digital market for taxation. We are not talking about web tax, but we are talking about having you know, the same level of taxation all over the digital market. Today, many over the top avoid the country of origin taxation through systems such as the double Irish with Dutch sandwich. And for instance, I think this is, to some extent, in this context, quite unfair, you know, for what's happening. And I know that, for instance, the OECD is working on projects like the base erosion and profit shifting. And I think this is something that need to be looked at carefully. Overall, I will say that, as I was saying before, on my starting remark, we have considered, we know that at the moment probably we have let's say the conflicting message, the turbulence is prevailing to some extent in terms of positive outcome. But I think in the medium run, ICT will contribute to give a great contribution to the growth. But this can be accomplished with fundamental changes, especially on the supply of the side of the labor market. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Andy Wyckoff, Impact of ICT on Jobs and Skills, the Evidence from the OECD Analysis.
Good morning, and let me just start off by saying really appreciate Lorenzo and Telecom Italia for organizing this, and what a pleasure it is to be under the chairmanship of Dick Beard again. I benefited from this several years at the OECD. This is the most important session at the IGF. All that stuff about internet governance, no, I'm serious. You talk to a politician, a policymaker, it is jobs, jobs, jobs. Now, internet governance is important, don't get me wrong. I don't want anyone tweeting OECD thought internet governance wasn't important, but yeah, thanks, Mike. But this is fundamental for the economic performance and for the social well-being of people. It gives people a sense of worth, and we're in deep trouble. Right now, OECD has put out numbers. France, Italy, sputtering. Germany, the engine of Europe has slowed down. We see really mixed performance in the BRICS, particularly Brazil. We see an uptick, thankfully, in the US and the UK, but as has been said, this has been accompanied by a lot of anxiety and continued insecurity. Unemployment is especially prevalent amongst the youth, where we know this has a long-term, career-long impact on their incomes and their well-being. And we're beginning to see the emergence, maybe just because I come from France, but the emergence of a backlash against IT. We have laws being put forward in the country I live in that are basically anti-Amazon, anti-Uber, and are pushing back on some of this job destruction. We see renewed scrutiny of the quality of the IT jobs, recent press stories about the pickers at these Amazon inventories, and we've seen protests in San Francisco over the so-called Google bus and some of the inequalities that are very apparent there. And as Lorenzo just pointed out, I'm really happy he connected it to this section. We have an issue of taxes and the tax management practices used by some of these large firms whose assets are largely intangible and allow them to engage in these practices, the double Dutch-Irish sandwich, that are coming under scrutiny by another part of the OECD. And at the same time, we have confusion in the economics profession. You've got kind of the Dean of Productivity Analysis, Bob Gordon, talking about how there's headwinds against innovation and how this will lead to us returning to a natural low growth of productivity of like 0.5%. While at the other hand, you have Brynjolfsson and McAfee with their book against Race Against the Machine, suggesting no, we're just about to head into this huge disruptive period, which presumably is associated with high productivity gains. And as I just mentioned to Eli, even Larry Summers in the Wall Street Journal last week has an article talking about challenge of the future jobs. Now, the OECD is trying to use its multidisciplinary capability. My directorate looks at science and technology, but also the employment and education directors to look at this. Our work is just underway. My comments today are really more of a framing of the issue and a preliminary thoughts, and to solicit, as Dick Beard said, your input, as well as that from the panelists. I would hasten to say the opinions are my own. As Lorenzo said, I won't go into it. There's a long history of tech-induced structural change. You just look at what happened in agriculture in all of our countries. It was only 150 years ago, 1/3 of employment was in this sector. Now it's down to 1 to 2%. And with that came huge social changes. The movement from a rural situation to more of an urban. Likewise, in manufacturing, we've seen sustained productivity that's brought that labor force from about 1/3 down to now less than 1/5. And with it, the movement a little bit from urban to suburban living, and then we've become service-based economies. But just as we rely on services now for almost all of the jobs, we begin to see ICT being applied, and it's beginning to displace this work, starting off with the easy clerical stuff, and now moving up the chain to routine tasks, transactional activities, and even some conceptual work. Now, and I don't need to tell this crowd, you've seen big impacts on some sectors, certainly advertising, anything dealing with that can be digitized, such as content, retail, and even government services, the post office, for example. And I think we're on the brink of seeing big impacts in areas such as transportation, finance, and even education, as you have these MOOCs where you can have a professor teach, instead of just hundreds of students, tens of thousands. And I won't go into this because I think historical analogies are a bit limited. Lorenzo's pointed out why IT is different. I agree with him completely. The one thing I would add, in addition to his point about what Brynjolfsson would call scale without mass, that leads to this network effects that have this winner-take-all phenomena, is more generally the deconcentration of production. IT allows a fragmentation of production that reduces the need for the hierarchy that we've seen in big firms. We just don't need that anymore. There's an interesting theory here called Coase's theory that said why the firm existed was to compile and to process information to make decisions. Well, IT means that it can be a much flatter organization, leading to things such as offshoring, the proliferation of global value chains, and flatter hierarchies, this phenomena of what's being called kind of a freelance economy, where you float and you kind of work for different employees. You're not really, different employers, you're not really attached to any single one. We're also seeing a huge blurring, and all of us feel this, I think, between work and home. Let me just throw out a few statistics here quickly. Lorenzo's already referred to them. If you take kind of the poster child here of Google or Facebook, they have 50,000 employees. They're roughly making $50 billion in revenue. It's roughly $1 million revenue per employee. That's what we mean by scale without mass. Amazon is closer to 600,000 per employee. Compare that to a very successful firm like Walmart that only has $200,000 per employee. And the US average here is 120,000. So these firms are really operating on a much different scale per employee. So good sales, good profits, not so many jobs. And it's not just the IT sector. You begin to see as IT gets employed to other sectors, even like steel or oil extraction, that the number of employees required is far less than it used to be in the future. Now, this may sound unduly pessimistic. I don't want to leave that as the final point here. I just want to conclude with a few more positive things going forward. First, and I won't dwell on this, I think Lorenzo's already said, ICT has been really a bright spot in what's been a pretty gloomy economy. It's continued to grow through the recession and invest long-term in things like R&D. There's huge demand for ICT skills. You just look at something like the Manpower Talent Shortage Survey or the Conference Board Help Wanted, and you can see this. I think we misunderstand or don't understand very well the potential of IT as a platform for entrepreneurship. The barriers to entry to starting a job have fallen, starting a firm have fallen dramatically thanks to anybody being able to open a website, but also taking advantage of platforms such as eBay or Facebook. Our work at the OECD shows that almost all of the net job growth comes from these young startup firms. And we see this across 19 different countries. It's young, not small, and our policies need to change a little bit to reflect that. Too often we think of small businesses, and we think many of these businesses stay small forever, and the demands for young firms are actually different than that for long-term small skill firms. Lorenzo pointed out the need for skills. I agree with him. I would just say policymakers tend to rely on this a lot as a panacea, and there are limits to what we could do to skill and to reskill. Okay, let me just end with where I see future jobs coming. Lorenzo pointed to the need for active adjustment policies. I agree with him completely to help some of these people who are going to be displaced. That does require taxes, and he's pointed to it. And I think there's, as I said, a need for firms to pay their fair share as well as high wealth individuals. I see the largest opportunities coming in three different places. First of all, there's all these new jobs we just can't imagine today. And if you look back and had asked your grandparents of some of the occupations that are most prominent today, they wouldn't even recognize them. I guess I would just say three things. One, I think the internet is a huge potential platform for innovation, for creating new industries we haven't thought about and new jobs. In any country that limits access to the free flow of information is just shooting itself in the foot in terms of economic growth in the future. The second, there are some huge grand challenges all economies face, whether it be climate change, aging populations, or development more broadly, that need to harness this innovation and labor resources. And I think this is a place that we can put some of the freed up resources. Last but not least, it's not every day I agree with Carlos Slim, but I want to say his idea of reducing the size of the work week and introducing more leisure is probably not a bad thing to start thinking about. If you look at some of the growth in occupations, some of the fastest growth have been in areas that are more leisure-like: musicians, chefs, athletes, fashion and design, even yoga instructors and so forth. And what you're seeing is a growth of the leisure economy that continues, and one where I think future job growth can be found. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andy. Professor Ellie Noem will speak on social redistributive effects of the impact of ICT on jobs and skills.
Thank you very much, Dick. Well, first of all, I totally agree with Andy that this is the most important topic before this internet event here today. And with all due respect to the other topics here at IGF, and speaking as somebody who was at the summit in Geneva in 2003 and in Tunisia in 2005 that created IGF. So I have all respect for the topics here, but the question who gets to determine domain names seems, in comparison to the economic well-being of billions of people, rather secondary. So, but I will go one step beyond, which is that the internet is not, as many people honestly and truly believe, the solution to the problems of job displacement and job creation. It's not the solution. It is actually really a significant part of the problem itself. And therefore, the internet community, having benefited, also has to step up and take serious responsibility, which means initiative, ideas, money, and ending certain resistances, such as resistance to paying fair shares in taxes. The Google thing has come up already, and so on. I think that's just disgraceful. So but raising some of these things obviously are not going to be terribly popular, but I think if we talk about this inside this group here, we will perhaps make some progress. In the United States, the industrial blue-collar jobs are disappearing. 350,000 industrial jobs each year in the United States for 2 decades now, plus the multiplier job effects. So that's about 1.6 per industrial worker, 2.5 per skilled industrial worker. So that's almost 500,000 jobs each year vanishing. Now, many of those would have disappeared anyway, but more slowly. And time is money. People would have had more time to adjust, to retrain, to relocate. So there is an internet effect here, and a negative one. Then after the blue-collar jobs came the pink-collar jobs. Retailing is moving online. See what is happening. Just go around main streets in so many towns and cities. Hundreds of thousands. Look at what is happening to the support industries, service support industries, as they move offshore. Again, hundreds of thousands of jobs. And now white-collar jobs are also disappearing. Middle management levels are disappearing, kind of good. Low functions are offshore to cheap labor countries. High-level consulting or publishing, just 2 examples, might still originate in New York or London or Boston and so on, but the back office function are increasingly moving to India and other countries. Lots of jobs become part-time, perma-temps, project-based, no benefits, no job security. Now, I know that many will say that the internet is also the creator of many jobs. Yes, true, but The number of new jobs should not be exaggerated. Even in Silicon Valley, ground zero, the overall number of jobs has, according to the census, not increased all that much. It's been surprisingly small, and that's true for other high-tech areas too. Sure, there are studies that will show that if you use the internet, you are likely to get the job sooner, and you're more mobile, and therefore the conclusion that are being touted as people should use more internet. There should be more internet because then people would get jobs. But that's kind of those are these suck-up studies in a kind of plethora of suck-up type literature. For 20 years now, you can get just about any research funded if it promises to show the positive impact of the internet as a force of good. But an important question is the macro effect, not the micro effect. Saying that if you just use the internet, unemployment will go away is like saying people, well, you should, our policy is to give people coats and ties because studies have shown that if you show up to a job interview with a coat and tie, you're more likely to get a job than without it, and therefore unemployment will go away. That just doesn't work. That's the difference between macroeconomics and microeconomics, and it's very kind of easy and very fundamental. So therefore, the internet, in effect, is reducing the number of jobs for older folks who become much less useful and usable. For younger people, there are fewer entry-level jobs. And so if the internet is so great for young people, then how come young unemployment is larger than it's ever been before? How come that the younger generation, for the first time in the United States, is less well off than their parents? And how come if the internet has kind of destroyed geography and destroyed distance, how come they still live at home with mom and dad? So we observe several things. First, the internet, in its creation of greater efficiencies, bravo, is also a net job destroyer. Secondly, the internet is an economic destabilizer. That's what disruption is all about. Third, the internet is a force for inequality. And fourth, the internet creates inequality among regions. Look what's happening in some regions in the US or in European countries. These are results not of failures, but of success. It's not ill will, but they're the results of fundamental economics. And these fundamental economics are that internet activities are typically characterized by high fixed cost, low marginal cost, network effects. This leads to major economies of scale, network effects, and therefore it leads to highly concentrated industries with a few firms, the winners who take it all. Second, every industry, every company, every economy is structured like a tournament. And the question is how that tournament is organized. Does the winner take all, or just a little bit more? Are there many winners? There's a whole literature in economics about this, and it tells us that the higher the risk in the tournament, in the economy, the greater you must make the disparity between winners and losers. You must compensate the players by a higher jackpot. And that is what is happening. So the winner takes much. The losers gave years of their lives and are left with lottery tickets, also known as stock options, that are now worthless. Third, the rapid change in knowledge and technologies means that the learning curve is shorter and that there is less value to experience. This favors the young relative to the old and the past. So the old are expensive and out of date and expendable, not just in other industries, but not only in all industries, but especially in the internet industries with their rapid growth of change. Now, just wait a little if you're young and kind of smug about this. What goes around comes around. Do you really think that Google will have all these current young hotshots of today still running around tomorrow as middle-aged lukewarm shots? I kind of doubt that. So there's less room for older workers. And this just as the time when life expectancy rises, when retirement systems become unaffordable to societies, and when companies find ways to avoid paying taxes to contribute to the pot. And they do so mostly by playing off the various jurisdictions that have unemployment problems, and everybody has, and want to attract high-tech firms, that everybody does. So the more job losses the internet companies create directly or indirectly through their activities, and bless them in many ways, but the more job losses happen, the lower the taxes become, because their bargaining strength becomes higher. And therefore, the less, relatively speaking, resources communities have to create infrastructure, to afford education. Instead of a social safety net, we get social networks. Let them eat tweets. And the volatility of the internet economy also rises. The dynamics are kind of roughly as follows. An innovative idea sets hopes. A boom gets on its way. A boom gets higher. People invest. New firms get started. But in a competitive environment, competition drives down prices, down to marginal cost. Marginal costs are very low. That price is not sustainable for long. Companies go out of business en masse. Investors flee. A downward spiral happens. The bubble bursts. Now, the survivors start to make some money. Hope rises again. A new cycle starts. And another factor for economic volatility is that other industries using IT becoming more volatile. Just look what happens in the financial sector. Our entire economic well-being is based on the fact that these things will not crash or interact in surprising ways. Companies go out of business in 5 minutes. Economists can go out of business in 5 days. So the information economy is an unstable economy. And because of Moore's law, of acceleration of everything, the cycles almost inevitably will accelerate in frequency and maybe in amplitude. And government remedies to stabilize this are becoming weaker and slower. So the consequences. First, it is important for internet companies to take responsibility. They take, after all, responsibility for the internet as the source of almost everything that is good. Tahrir Square, things happening right here in Turkey. But somehow the negative things are always somebody else's fault. What is remarkable in my mind is how the backlash against inequality that is emerging, those 1%ers, and the job losses have been diverted in the public eye from the fundamental source, high technology, disruptive, fundamentally new economics, which is partly a responsibility of the internet community in doing what it does, and directed towards the financial sector. Railing against banks is always popular, always gets attention, but for a while only. But this will change, and internet companies will get a lot of unfavorable attention. And I'll kind of skip a lot of stuff for reasons of time. Then let me just kind of raise 4 bullet points of what to do. First, take responsibility. Stop denial. Man up. Woman up. Take some responsibility. That's already half the battle. Second, stop claiming to be the solution. The dumbest thing that the internet community can do is try to take advantage of the problem it has helped to create by proclaiming that it is the solution. It should receive more help from government, more support, less regulation, more access, etc., etc., and everything will be fine. Third, recommend, support, and finance governmental actions. There are smart people, out-of-the-box type people in this community. We can make a difference with ideas that are ahead of politicians. Which ones should those be? Unfortunately, there's not time, but I hope that we will get to discuss it. Fourth, do something directly, and not a little philanthropy, and not a little PR stuff. Channel the enormous talent and creativity and problem-solving skills. Do something in poor cities, do something in poor countries. Locate work sites there. And I don't mean lower Manhattan when I talk about cities. I mean kind of Newark and Detroit. Do something for the STEM, science, technology, engineering, math education. Send some of your best and brightest to teach it, not just a little PR guest lecture. Train older people in particular. Disgraceful how the internet first marginalizes older folks, makes fun of them, leaves them destitute, yes, and all this without lending a hand of help. So to conclude, the impact of internet-induced economic displacement is serious. It will not go away. It will get worse. The internet community is full of problem solvers, thinkers outside the box. We need such thinking unless we want others to do it for us and to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eli. Our next speaker is Lillian Nawalga. She will speak on the impact of ICT on jobs and skills, the evidence from Africa. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's kind of interesting being seated to someone who is a little bit, not a little bit, very much negative about the opportunities of the internet. And coming from Africa, where we are singing about opportunities created by the internet, I find his experiences a bit interesting and disturbing. So it would be nice to compare notes. Hopefully, we are not heading where, you know, developing countries like the US is. I'll try to probably stick to studies or probably some facts that have come out of the opportunities created by the internet. And I'll not say that we do not have challenges. The challenges are there, but slowly we are trying to address them. Recent statistics from the ITU show that slightly 20% of the population in Africa will be online by the end of this year. And this is quite double the percentage that was in 2010. So showing that, you know, there's some sort of increase and people are appreciating the use of the internet. And I cannot ignore the fact that to us, ICT is a component that is leading to economic growth. And still, I will rely on figures that have been researched. I'm sure that the World Bank is a source of, you know, data. And as I was reading around this whole topic about internet and jobs, creative destruction or creation, I don't know, I heard from OECD that kind of, you know, it's a creative destruction, takes away from what's happening, but creating opportunities. This study was released in 2013, and the World Bank observed a 10% increase in telephone, mobile phone, internet, and broadband usage led to an increase in, you know, in GDP. And depending on the technology in question, telephone led to small figures, but again, they show something. I'll just share that with you. The mobile, the landline was 0.73%, mobile 0.81%, internet in general was 1.1%, and broadband 1.38% increase in GDP. And this is just for Africa. What does this tell us? That people are appreciating, people are running away from use of the traditional means of communication like that, landlines, and slowly by slowly there are opportunities that the internet and broadband access or infrastructure is providing in terms of economic growth. Looking at ICTs and youth, we still have a young population, and I think most of the youngest population comes from Africa. And yes, unemployment is there, but we are seeing opportunities that are coming up. And some of these include opportunities presented by ICTs, things like BPO outsourcing, where youth face problems or challenges of not having the relevant skills. Entry points set by employers, you have to have some sort of, you know, experience to enter into the job market, whereas ICT is changing that. Through, you know, BPO, you're able to, you know, find someone who is ready to place you somewhere where you can start and get this experience. And the fact that Professor Eli, I think, shared that ICTs are kind of, you know, taking jobs away from the older folks and creating opportunities for the young ones. For me, that is a positive. And it's just that we are in a digital economy, all right? And if ICTs are taking away opportunities for the older folks, probably the older folks should embrace more ICT and the impact it can have on their, on their livelihoods. And why I'm saying that is some of the challenges that we are facing is the lack of political will, amongst our leaders back at home, because most of them have still not got away from this traditional way of doing things. We are seeing opportunities like e-public goods, e-governance, and we are seeing this tremendously improving the way of living, increasing access to information, access to services. And yes, there are studies that have shown how, through e-governance, through increase to services through ICTs, people are able to access more. On the issue of taxation, I would say it is both. I would address it into issues. Telecoms, yes, do have to pay taxes. It's one way of feeding into the global, into the economy. And I would share something we do have in my country, and I think some of the neighboring countries. We have the Rural Communications Development Fund, and there's a levy that is taxed on every telecom. It's 2% of the profits they make per year that they give back to the regulatory authority, and this money is used to provide rural access, to areas that are underserved, provide centers where youth or people can go to access simple things like making a telephone call, accessing internet, getting into this whole social media bandwagon. And we have seen people, we've seen populations, we've seen societies creating, using things like social media, Twitter, to create impact in society, demand for better services. I can share a story where it is hard to get an appointment to meet the Prime Minister in my country. However, once in a while, he does host a Twitter chat. And anyone, you don't have to write an appointment letter. He will just respond to your questions directly. For us, that is a positive because we still live in a place where bureaucracy is quite big, and beating the security system or getting through the appointment system to make a direct conversation with the leaders is hard. And that is a positive for us. So in terms of moving on to job creation, we've seen entrepreneurship, local innovations coming up through the internet. I would share that, for instance, in Kenya, there are over 15 technology hubs that are employing youth, providing platforms or providing a space for young people in society to come together, develop solutions that are relevant to their, to their communities. And this is creating jobs and opportunities for people to embrace ICT or, digital technology. So to me, the internet is really an enabler for economic development and social growth. And in Africa, much as we still have challenges of access, not having the relevant skills, we are seeing opportunities that the internet and general ICTs are presenting. So with those few remarks, I would like to hear more. Maybe this is just the experience from the US. I don't know, maybe Honorable Minister here will have a different or probably some experience from Colombia. So it would be nice to know what's happening in your countries or in your continents, because to us, this is a great opportunity to further, catch up with the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Minister Diego Molano will speak on the impact of ICT on jobs and skills, evidence from Latin America. Mr. Minister, please.
Thank you very much. I couldn't agree more with Andy and on the importance of this topic. This is the most important discussion at the IGF, because everybody's concerned about jobs. Everybody, everywhere. And I don't want to go back to the diagnosis. I think Andy and Also Lorenzo and Elinoam pointed that out, and you know, I have here a slide mentioning Andrew McAfee. He was already mentioned before. He did a lot of studies on the impact of technology revolutions on jobs, and what it is happening now is amazing. The jobs being destructed by this industry is huge everywhere, everywhere, in developed and developing countries, everywhere. But the issue here is not what the problem is how we are going to deal with it. What can we do? And look, a few weeks ago I was with the former president and CEO of Kodak. Do you remember Kodak?
Yeah.
Do you remember the films? No. In the 1990s, Kodak had 165,000 jobs, direct jobs. And Kodak created millions and millions of jobs around the world. My grandfather had a little shop in his little town developing rolls, developing films. And what happens to Kodak? You know, last year it was bought by just peanuts. No jobs created. All those people who were working directly or indirectly for Kodak have no jobs. But then what happened? Facebook bought Instagram. And Instagram had just 15 employees, and they paid like $1.2 billion for that company. And that's the new Kodak. So millions of jobs in Kodak, no jobs in Instagram. That's a clear picture of what is happening in many, many, many industries. So what to do? That's the main challenge that politicians have. So we have many opportunities. One big opportunity was already mentioned, which is impact sourcing. Impact sourcing, that's important. And I really encourage companies to help creating those jobs in developing countries. We have many, many, many good stories in Colombia where we have focused on creating jobs in very, very poor areas, sourcing different activities to developed markets. For example, this picture, I took this picture a few weeks ago in Chocó, in the Pacific area of Colombia. One of the poorest areas in Latin America, way poorer than the average of sub-Saharan Africa, but in Latin America. We created just 300 jobs, outsourcing jobs, that completely transform a community. Completely transform a community. We just train people there to provide outsourcing services to the US market, to the Hispanic African American market, and it's been very, very successful. So you have a lot of stories where you can really do a change using technology, and you can really create a huge impact. However, the problem today we have is how we speed up the resilience, because we are going to have resilience. How we speed it up, that's the problem. How we take measures to make sure that people get new jobs, and we create new jobs. So from the developing world, we have to see that the problem is how we develop the talent. We have a huge problem with talent. We have no jobs. But then, in every single market in the whole world, we lack of engineers. There is no engineers. People do not want to study engineering, especially IT-related engineering. In Colombia, we have a space for 93,000 engineers now, and we don't have them. In Europe, 1 million. That's according to Nelly Cruz. 1 million jobs for engineers or for IT-related professionals. What is happening today? As one of my professors in IMD in Los Angeles, we are in the lazy generation. Young people do not want to study engineering because they find it very complicated, or math skills are very, very low. And you know what? Marketing. These professions are not sexy anymore. So, and look at in the whole world, the number of new schools teaching forensic sciences. You know what that is for? CSI, the TV show. Because we need to do a new marketing of these professions. It is happening everywhere. It is happening in the US, it is happening in the whole Latin America and Europe. Young people do not want to study this, although the opportunities are here. Secondly, we have to work on IT skills of our people. I think the laborer of the future has to have a piece of IT engineer. Every laborer, every single profession has to develop IT skills, and you see it in the OECD numbers. We all have to work on that. IT skills. We have doctors that understand technology. We need accountants, lawyers, nurses that really know how to deal with technology, because innovation doesn't come from engineering. Innovation comes when the doctors understand technology and they see the opportunities using technology. Where the innovation comes when, what I always say that innovation comes from serendipity, and serendipity happens when there is a variety of people thinking and understanding the opportunities. So we have to improve the IT skills of people. But you know what? The problem we have is how we take advantage of what it is happening in the world to solve the single most important problem of the world, which is poverty. With the challenges that we've seen today in job creation or job destruction we have, my concern is that this fantastic tool that we have in our hands, which is technology to reduce poverty, it is not going to work. We've been, listening to many stories and promises of the technology world, that with technology we are going to solve the problems of poverty around the world. But we are not going to deliver that unless we help developing countries to create their own skills to do that. Look at big companies, the ones that have been mentioned here today, the Facebooks and the Googles and the big ones, the Amazons. They are not coming to the developing world to solve our problems. We have to solve our problems ourselves. In order to do that, we have to help the developing world to develop innovation ecosystems. We have to develop the African countries to create their ecosystems, and that means we have to develop them to create the right talent and to create the right environment to develop their own solutions using technology. That's key. And that's what we are doing in Colombia. We are working very hard, not only in expanding technology, which we have already done that. We have broadband access everywhere, even in the middle of the jungle. But the challenge we have is how we create applications for the poor. Applications that help the poor to leapfrog. That's what we are working on. And in order to do that, we have to create our local innovation ecosystems. That's the most important task that we have in front of us. So we have that challenge. The IT industry is going to blame for the destruction of jobs sooner or later. We are going to have new laws, new regulations, but then the issue here is not what the problem is how we take advantage of technology to solve our problems. And in our case, the single most important problem is poverty, how we really use technology to reduce poverty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Finally, Michael Kindy, who is the chief economist at ISOC, will speak on the internet as a driver of new entrepreneurship.
Great,
Michael,
thank
please.
you, and thank you for the invitation. So the Internet Society, one of the things we do is promote access to the open internet, promote deployment of internet and making sure that it's open. And one of my jobs as the chief economist is to look for and hopefully eventually start to quantify the benefits of access to the open internet. And we recently put out a report available on our website, a global internet report that talked about a number of what is the open internet and the benefits of accessing it. So what I'd like to talk about today is how access to the open internet can enable entrepreneurship, and in particularly a much more inclusive entrepreneurship, reaching all of the regions of the world and people that might not have had access to the opportunities without access to the open internet. And this is ongoing research. I don't have any numbers. I can't talk about the micro, much less the macroeconomic impact of it, but you know, I'll present our initial thoughts on the topic. So today, much of the entrepreneurship, at least in the public view, is focused on big high-tech clusters. And of course, Silicon Valley is the prime example of that. And if you look at a company like Google, is a good example of the benefits of being in that cluster. The Google founders started at Stanford, used the Stanford network until they basically overwhelmed it and moved into the typical garage to start it up, raised their money through venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, found their CEO, their former CEO there, and really grew through the benefits of being in this cluster. But of course, being in a cluster can raise barriers for people who aren't in the cluster and have no access to a cluster like that. Many governments, of course, have tried to duplicate these clusters with mixed results. But what we're looking at is the fact that many of the ingredients that make up a cluster are now available online and can promote entrepreneurship without direct access to the cluster. So, and we've talked about a few of these here, and I'll just run through these quickly, but education. MIT's entire catalog is available online, so the electrical engineering and all of the other aspects, and then there's the MOOCs, the video courses that are available to anyone with a good internet access. You can do a lot of research online, of course, find out more about the area that you're thinking about. You can download a lot of open source software and tools to help save you time in developing your innovation. You can raise seed money online. I'm wearing one of the Pebble smartwatches, so I put in some money in Kickstarter. They raised $10 million to start the production of the watches, and then people that contributed got a discount on the watches once the company had been started. You can hire employees. There's many websites to hire full-time employees or to find people to do particular tasks. Equipment used to be a significant capital expense, but now you can have access to cloud computing and turn it into more of an operating expense to run your company online. You can find mentors online. There's platforms like in Africa, there's one called Mara Mentor, where entrepreneurs can have access to mentors to help them through stages of the innovation cycle. You can collaborate online. There's sites like GitHub where people collaborate on creating software. And some of it is open source, some of it is a platform for creating proprietary software as part of a company. And of course, everyone doesn't have to be in the same location for that. And what's really interesting is that now having a GitHub portfolio can actually act as your resume. So we talked to someone at one of the innovation hubs in Kenya, and he said that the computer engineering, the education system isn't that good there, so people are self-trained, and as a way of showing their skills, they just make access to their GitHub portfolio to show what bugs they've found, what they've done on other people's software projects, what they've done on their own projects, and that is effectively their resume, and that acts in in place of a more traditional education. So a lot of opportunities available, and in this report I was talking about, we have some examples. My favorite is an engineer in Togo, found some plans, open source plans for a 3D printer online, designed it using electronic waste that was piling up that's largely being shipped from Europe and other places, designed a $100 3D printer using open source plans and electronic waste, raised money, $4,000 on a European crowdfunding website, and now has a little business creating 3D printers. So a lot of that, of course, most of it, probably all of it, only possible because of access to the internet for him sitting in Togo. So a lot of the tools are online. There's still, of course, a role for face-to-face meetings. We see that here. We're all on the internet, but we still come to meetings like this because you can't replace face-to-face interactions. And certainly there's innovation hubs springing up across Africa and other places where entrepreneurs can get together and meet people and have interactions, meet potential funders and the like. So the interesting research will be what role those innovation hubs take in the whole process. There's not been many exits yet. It's hard to really study the long-term impact, but at least they don't seem to be as inclusive as a traditional cluster like Silicon Valley. There are, one or two floors in a building where people get together every now and then, meet, get access to the internet, and work on the initial stages of their companies. So in conclusion, really, this obviously is not going to be the end of Silicon Valley, this online entrepreneurship. It might not even be the source of the next Google or Facebook, but it certainly offers opportunities for many like this engineer in Togo that wouldn't have had access to the money, to the research, and to the markets without the internet. And for us, that's very important as we make the case for why it's important to have access to the internet and keep it open for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Let's now open it up to the participants at the workshop and online. Let me take your questions to any of the panelists or comments, please. Thank you.
You've mentioned problems that I've certainly found. My name is Louise Bennett from the BCS in the UK, and a few years ago I audited the creation of our national accounts, and it was quite clear that we weren't capturing the digital economy properly, and that has been mentioned by several of the participants. Could you give me your views on how we can capture the digital economy properly in our national accounts, in GDP, and also how we can adequately value free services on the internet and their contribution to our economic well-being?
Okay, thank you very much. I think there were two questions there. Perhaps Andy would like to address the first, and then perhaps Michael could take on the second.
Thank you. Dick. I'll be fast. I guess I would just say, first of all, that GDP always gets encumbered with trying to do things that it was never intended to do. We shouldn't make too much of GDP. It's a limited, and I would kind of, just to provoke Lorenzo a little bit, yeah, there's consumer surplus we're not capturing, but if Bob Gordon was here, he'd say, well, think of what indoor plumbing did to consumer surplus. So we've probably been not capturing consumer surplus for a very long time. There's a question whether it's worse now than it has been. Where I see the greatest gains are in really the industrial classifications. I think we are still working in the past. I'm very happy to see the ISIC Rev 4, if that means anything to anyone, or the North American industry classification system move forward, because I think that gives you greater granularity, and we're able to pick out aspects of the digital economy, particularly digital content, that we haven't been able to do before.
Michael?
So I think the second question was on capturing the value of free services. Clearly a good point. I think there's two parts to that. One is to keep in mind when you look at something like the app economy and just look at the total amount of money and the number of developers, that a lot of them are working for free essentially. And so don't get carried away with total numbers, but look at how it breaks down, and I think that's been covered with a winner-takes-all aspects of something like the app economy. But I think the second point is that many of these services are not free. They're accompanied by significant advertising. So Google, one could say they're offering free services, but of course they're capturing billions in revenue off of the advertising. And I'm not sure if that's being captured directly, but clearly that's where the money is, and it's just a different way of looking at the secondary source of revenue from the advertising and the value that it brings.
Yeah, I agree with Michael. There is no such free services. There is no such a free lunch. If you read in detail, when you open an account in such free services, what you're giving away, say you see that you're paying a high price for that. But the macro problem we have today is that what we are seeing in Europe and also in developing countries is the balance of trade of technology. You know, when I met Elino many years ago, like 16 years ago, we were working on accounting rates. Remember those days? Like the money, Lorenzo, remember the accounting rates debate in the 90s? You know, Americans and Europeans were paying a lot of money for international traffic, so developing countries were very happy receiving a lot of money. So the balance of trade of technology was positive in favor of the developing world. Now it's the opposite. We're paying a lot of money to, especially the US, in terms of technology, thanks to these services and applications. So this is not the Robin Hood effect. I call it the Hood-Robin effect. But then the issue here is how these new services are really challenging the creation of local content. Because in the past, before the digital age, the revenue of the company that created local content in the developing world was basically advertising, but local advertising, and that revenue would create local content. Now, the free services are getting that money from advertising, online advertising, and next year in Latin America, 35% of the revenue of advertising is going to be online. And that 35% of money who was before in the region creating local content now goes away. They don't even pay taxes. That money doesn't even pay taxes, and that goes away somewhere else. I don't want to say where, but perhaps a tax haven. So we have 35% less money to create local content. That's what I'm talking about. What are we going to do? Because that's challenging Africa, Asia, Latin America, and also Europe on how we create local content. And local content means news, televisions, but also applications.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Yes, please.
Thank you. Giacomo Mazzone from European Broadcasting Union. If you were here yesterday, probably you heard my president, Filippo, mentioning the case that confirms exactly what you're saying of Brazil, where there is one company, the leading company in the market, media market is Global, that employs 30,000 people creating high-value contents. What do you say contents? That means programs, means news, printed media, etc., etc. And last year, for the first time, 80% of global incomes were compared and reached by a single company that has only 100 employees in the country and that doesn't produce any single news, any single program, any single item in the country. So this creates a huge problem for the media industry. And the media industry, as was underlined yesterday, is essential not only in the economic sector, but it's essential for the democratic future of a country. So this opened, as the minister probably underlined, another issue and another kind of problem that we need to face and need to tackle, that is the future of our democracy, the sustainability of our democracy at the national level. Unless that we are thinking to create also a global world with global governance that is run at the central level for everybody. The two things are going in a direction that is incompatible. You cannot have economic power completely shifted somewhere else without affecting the national balance of power, the national balance, the check and balance of the different situation that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Other comments, I believe, in the front, yes. Well, please. No, this is good.
My name is Pilar Sáenz. I'm from Charisma Foundation in Colombia. And we have a very good opportunity in this kind of forum to talk with, for example, the minister here. And I think that it's important to find a way that this commercial approach or this idea of creating jobs is very important, but we have other consideration also. If you think the commercial thing in the commercial business model, maybe we need to think in other kind of models. For example, free software, or for example, the free culture models that are different, or the traditional business models. And I think that in technology, this is a good approach to this kind of project, this kind of problems, how to create more jobs. Maybe we don't use a commercial and a proprietary approach. Maybe that way could be useful for us. And that's one of our concerns when I listen to you. Maybe we need to include some other approach, not only the commercial one, not only the business one. There is other options, and I really want to see that in this panel also.
Thank you for that comment. I believe in the back here, sir? Yes, go.
Yes? Oh, yeah. I'm Javier Seriña, Telefónica in Spain. First of all, thank you very much for the very interesting interventions. And I would like to see your opinion on 2 points that I think are the most interesting in my view. One is the problem with the taxation and the localization of taxation, and the second one, the preservation of the open internet as a tool for job creation, and not only in the sense of preserving the access, the open access, but also avoiding the creation of new monopolies in terms of search engines, operating systems, especially mobile operating systems, app stores. So my question is, do you envisage any kind of measures that could be taken to solve these two problems? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe the first point was for the panel to speak more broadly about taxation as a tool. The second point, I'm afraid I did not catch. Perhaps a panelist did.
Yeah, the open internet is a job.
Okay. Okay, very good. Ellie, would you like to take those 2 points?
There are obviously numerous ways to circumvent national taxation. There are some countries, particularly some smaller places, that make a living of being tax havens, which is a friendly way to saying that they encourage and support tax avoidance, maybe legal, sometimes not. It's very difficult to do something about that short of armed invasion. So therefore, I think that countries should establish some minimum taxes on companies doing business in their territory, so that if you kind of do artfully something by avoiding taxes, by structuring your deals so that somehow all the profits are in Ireland or wherever, or in Liechtenstein or whatever, that would be the ability to divert taxation would be reduced. That's a question of political will, frankly. And the problem in most countries is that the people who have an interest in avoiding taxes are also fairly influential, and so therefore you don't have that. So all across Europe, say, with social democratic governments, and yet these loopholes are just glaring. Since somebody mentioned the film industry, the media industry, it's just astonishing that kind of structures are being set up that people somehow support the film industry by avoiding taxes, and in turn, so this is somehow the idea is officially that this supports national culture, but the reality is, of course, that even Hollywood companies are using German tax shelters in order to reduce, for German investors to reduce taxes. So I think there would be a possibility for national, if there's the will there. The second issue was what?
As I understood it, the open internet is a platform for open access. Okay,
I'm not sure if that responds to the question, because I also didn't hear it. But here, one way kind of is to getting people to upgrade their skills. It would be, here's an idea. So instead of having your Social Security or retirement benefits kicking in at 65, 67 or whatever, if you could take a year or two off much earlier to retrain, that you would get your kind of a free support such as Social Security during that year or two, and then would retire 1 or 2 years later. In other words, why get people kind of to be stuck in the wrong skill set at the age of 40 when they could kind of still go on if they could afford retraining? So kind of prepay your retirement benefits and then retire later.
Sorry. Thank you. Just something on taxation. I think the political will should be to tax these big corporations. In my country, everyone pays tax, but I think we've seen the political will taking it a little bit too far. Before, we did not have taxes on IT equipment and software, development. So in this current financial year, our government introduced a tax on IT equipment. And of course, there's excise duty, but we were already paying excise duty on airtime, like data. So I think there needs to be a balance. For us who are pushing for use or promoting use of ICTs in general, when you overtax, it kind of, takes back. And as that, we are going to find that the many technologies that we are enjoying, the smartphones, many people cannot afford them. So with this taxation, it's going to make it even more impossible for someone in a rural area to appreciate the benefit of a smartphone because they cannot simply afford it. So that is where the issue of balancing how far can you go with taxation to get money to build the economy should come in, and I think that it's a different picture what getting from what's happening in other countries and what's happening at home. And it's something we are still trying to fight with the ministry. We don't know if we'll win the battle because it's sort of a tough one. We don't know if the tax will be removed, but we're hoping it will be. Certainly.
Hi, just to answer the second question, as I understood, was how to preserve the open internet with the large, I guess, market shares of the search engines or the closed walled gardens of some of the app stores. So that's obviously something that we all need to think about. I think that there's some challenges and some new economics involved in that, for instance, search, the switching costs are in some senses zero, right? I can remember clearly the day I was using Alta Vista and switched to Google, and the argument is it's just as easy to make the next move. From Android to iPhone might be obviously a little more complicated, but it also comes back to this question of free. So one of the traditional ways to look at these kinds of market shares would be through antitrust, but if the price is free, what's the consumer harm, right? If Android is being given away and took all this market share from the previous leader, what is the market harm? So I think what we would focus on is the benefit of the open internet and access and availability, and trying to educate users and everyone else to try and push for more open platforms. But I think traditionally for governments it's a harder one to address than with traditional things where you have a price and you can see where the price would go up with market power.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's take one more question, and we're reaching the concluding hour, please.
From the Swedish Development Agency, SIDA. I'm interested in the idea of impact sourcing, which was mentioned by Minister Vega. So I just wanted to hear from the other panelists what you think about that idea, and maybe from my perspective specifically to create jobs in developing countries where other job opportunities might be hard to come by, for example, post-conflict countries, etc. Thank you.
Do you want to speak to that, Lorenzo? I believe the question was to outsourcing and our experience with that and our views on it. Would anyone wish to take that on, perhaps? Minister Molano, would you like to speak to that, please?
Look, that's a huge opportunity. Look at, for example, the example I mentioned. We developed this project with, we subsidized training in this very, very poor area in the Pacific coast of Colombia. We created a call center, and we went to the US and talked to AT&T. And we closed a deal with them, a fantastic deal. They are very, very happy because those people in Colombia, they help AT&T Spanish-speaking African Americans. And it's been very, very positive for AT&T. And very, very positive for this community. We have plenty of these examples in Colombia. We have a line of work in the government to help impact sourcing. And I think this is a great opportunity. But the issue here is how we create the training, how we make it sustainable. We helped at the beginning with the training those people. We subsidize the building of the facilities. And so the issue is how we make it sustainable. That's the challenge we have.
Thank you all very much for this very interesting session. We believe we all come away agreeing that this is one of the most important panels of the IGF because it addresses the fundamentals of employment and of eradicating poverty. We've seen that the internet, which is the subject of this forum and also the subject of much of our careers, is seen both as a benefit but also as a cause of some of the difficulties that many countries are experiencing with the disruption that brings about slow employment gains and income inequality. But at the same time, there is, in the words of Elie Noam, we all need to take direct responsibility for the consequences of this technology and to, as one of our participants indicated, to begin to think out of the box and to find alternative models and solutions to deal with the consequences of a technology which is very much going to be with us and continue to drive our economies and our society. With that, let me conclude and thank you all very much, and thank you, Lorenzo, for organizing this panel. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Very thank you.